Okay, welcome to Understanding Emotions Part 2. We've already covered Part 1 and today we are going to be digging into understanding emotions in more depth. Today we're going to be looking at this super boring book again. We're going to help you identify and understand the different emotions. We're going to look at how we behave and how we think when we feel a particular way. We're going to teach you some of the tips and skills that therapists and coaches use to help diagnose emotions, and we're going to give you deeper self-awareness of the emotions that you're feeling. Okay, so let's get started. So as we already know, all emotions have a theme, a flavor, but also each emotion has a particular way that affects how we behave, how we act, and how we think. So when we feel a particular way, we generally have certain behaviors and we have certain thoughts as well. So when we can understand all of those areas together, it helps us to have a deeper comprehension of what's going on. So today we're going to go through the different emotions and I'm going to give you a flavor of, in CBT, what we call action tendencies and cognitive consequences. Let's start with anxiety. Now, we already know from the previous video that anxiety is to do with threat of something happening or danger from something happening. Now, when we feel anxious, we generally think in particular ways. For example, we might overestimate the probability of the threat happening. So if we're afraid of failing our exams, or if we are afraid of something bad happening, we might increase the probability that that's going to happen. We might be certain that that bad thing's going to happen. When we feel anxious, we also underestimate our ability to cope. So we might say, well, if that happens, then I'm not going to be able to cope. I'm not going to be able to handle it. We underestimate our ability to be able to tolerate or deal with that situation. Another way we think when we feel anxious is we might create an even more negative threat. So we might say, if I'm going to fail my exams, then wow, that's going to ruin my life, for example. Or, I'm going to get kicked out of home if I fail my exam. We create an even more negative threat. Or we might say, if I lose my job, then I'm going to lose my house. Again, we're creating a more negative threat. Also, when we feel anxious, we might behave in a particular way. For example, we might withdraw from what we're afraid of mentally. We might withdraw ourselves physically. We might generally move into more of an avoidance pattern, avoiding what we're afraid of. A lot of the time when we feel anxious, we might be seeking reassurance, wanting to get clear that we're okay or that things are going to be okay. And when we feel anxious, a lot of the time we can tranquilize our feelings through things like alcohol and drugs. Okay, so that gives you a basic understanding of how anxiety works. Let's go to the next emotion, depression. Now, from the last video, we know that depression is to do with loss and failure, but when we feel depressed, we can think in particular ways. For example, when we feel depressed, we only see the negative aspects of the situation. I'm sure you've been in that situation when you do feel depressed and you're only looking at the negative aspects. And that's one of the ways that we make ourselves depressed. When we feel depressed, we also tend to think about other losses or failures in the past. We think about those times in the past that remind us of what's happening now, or other things that are similar. And that is a way that we make ourselves feel depressed. And when we feel depressed, we think we are unable to help ourselves. We feel helpless about helping ourselves, and also we feel hopeless about the future. We think there's no chance, there's no way that we can get out of this, or we don't know how to get out of this situation. And also when we feel depressed, we can act in particular ways too. We can isolate ourselves from our friends and our family. We can withdraw into ourselves and just essentially isolate even more. And we can terminate some of the difficult feelings, again, by doing things like alcohol and drugs. So there are very specific behaviors and thoughts that we get stuck in when we feel these emotions. And on the course, I'm going to teach you the different beliefs and techniques to help free yourself of these negative emotions. But it really helps to understand the emotion, understand how it works, and help you to understand yourself if you're feeling those emotions. So let's look at the next emotion, unhealthy anger. Now, Anger can be a useful emotion. It can help motivate us. It can help us move forward and deal with things that are an issue in our life. However, the problem becomes when it becomes unhealthy, when it starts affecting us negatively. And when we feel angry, particularly when we feel angry at other things or other people, there's a particular way that we think. For example, when we feel angry at others, a lot of the time we believe that I am right and they are wrong. When we feel unhealthily angry, we struggle to see other people's point of view. We can see it from our perspective, but we can't necessarily see it from somebody else's perspective. And when we feel angry, a lot of the time we can overestimate the role that somebody else has acted deliberately. We might think they did it intentionally, or they're doing it to make us angry. So when we feel angry, we think in particular ways, but we also act in particular ways. Maybe when we feel angry, we become passive aggressive. We might say things that are nasty. We might be verbally abusive. When we feel angry, we can gather allies. We can gossip and tell other people. All of these things are qualities of unhealthy anger. Let's talk about guilt. Now, guilt is very interesting. When we feel guilty, we think in a particular way. When we feel guilty, the first thing we do is we think it's all me. We overestimate the role that we play. We think it's all to do with me. It's my fault. And on the flip side, we underestimate the role that other people have. We think it's got nothing to do with them. It's all me. And then what we also do is we ignore mitigating circumstances. We ignore other circumstances that might have an effect on how we feel. So imagine you've got a footballer and he misses a tackle and the opposition team win the game. And that footballer might feel very guilty. Now, in order to do that, firstly, he needs to accept total responsibility. Like, it's all my fault. It had nothing to do with the rest of the team. It had nothing to do with the other players who missed tackles before I missed the tackle. It had nothing to do with the goalie who missed the save. It was all me. Then they also need to believe that it's got nothing to do with everyone else. So they overestimate the role that they have, they underestimate the role that others have, and then they ignore mitigating circumstances. For example, they might have had an injury. That might be a mitigating circumstance. So you can see how we can shape ourselves and begin to feel the way that we do when we have these kinds of assumptions and perceptions. Let's look at the emotion of shame. When we feel shame or ashamed, firstly what we can do is we overestimate the idea that other people are even interested. We might think that if people find out, it's going to be terrible. They're going to be, this is going to be something that they're really going to focus on. And we can overestimate. We can also overestimate the degree of disapproval we're going to receive. We might think the disapproval is going to be far higher than it actually is. When we feel shame, we can also overestimate the time that the disapproval will last. We might think it's going to take forever, when in actual fact, that's not the case. And when we do feel shame, a lot of the time we hide from other people. We hide from the gaze of other people so that they can't see us, or we get out of their way. We tend to isolate ourselves. And it's a difficult emotion, but the way that we look at it, we can see that there's a very specific structure. And you'll be pleased to know whatever emotion you're feeling, it's very straightforward for us to find the necessary beliefs and thoughts that are linked to that emotion. Okay, let's do one more. The emotion of hurt. Now, when we feel hurt, the theme is that we are being treated badly. And when we feel hurt, we think in particular ways. When we feel hurt, we overestimate the unfairness of the other person's behavior. A lot of the time we might think it's worse than it actually is. When we feel hurt, we think the other person has acted uncaringly or indifferently. When we feel hurt, we feel like we have been uncared for. And also when we feel hurt, we tend to think of past hurts, past struggles that support how we're feeling now. And when we feel hurt, we expect others to make the first move, other people to apologize, other people to own up. Now, there's nothing wrong with feeling hurt sometimes. It's not nice when people treat us badly or uncaring. The problem is when we carry that emotion around with us because, something happened back in time yet we're the people, however you're feeling, are the people that carry that emotion with you. And that's the problem. And that's the problem with all these unhealthy, negative emotions. Emotions are important. They're healthy and help us to deal and understand life. However, when we spend our life carrying them around with us and they make our life worse because of it, then it can become a problem. And that's what we do on this course. We're going to help you let go of those difficult emotions as we go on. And when we feel hurt, we generally behave in certain ways. We might shut down communication with other people. We might expect them to make the first move. And we might also indirectly criticize them or gossip about them. There's many ways that we behave when we feel this particular way. So just to summarize, hopefully what you're getting is that each emotion has a theme, and each emotion has a particular way that we think when we feel that emotion, a particular set of thoughts, and each emotion has particular behaviors attached with it. So when you understand all these things, you can begin to diagnose and understand what you're feeling, what emotions you're dealing with. And if there's any other emotions that you do have, just put a message underneath the video at the bottom of the screen. And there are other emotions. There's jealousy, there's envy, and more. Now, as we go on the course, you're going to be able to begin to isolate the difficult emotions and also the beliefs attached to them. And from my last video, you'll know that we can have mixed emotions, that your problem or the problems that you're dealing with, you might have more than one emotion. You might be feeling angry, you might be feeling hurt, you might be feeling depressed. And the question to ask yourself, is this emotion helping you? Is it helping you solve the problem, or is it causing you more suffering? Because if you're holding on to it and it's causing you more suffering, then that's something that we want to take action over. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay with me. We're going to be looking at beliefs in the next video.